The letter came folded in 3 sharp creases, dropped arrogantly into my mailbox like a warning shot. Your property doesn't align with the aesthetics of our community. We strongly encourage you to consider selling before legal steps are taken. That's what the HOA had the gall to write, backed by smug board members who thought I was some clueless old rancher sitting on forgotten dirt. What they didn't know, what they never bothered to check, was that their shiny suburban development, their paved streets, their clubhouse, even the fancy gate they guarded like treasure, all sat on land I owned, leased to the city decades ago. And now, thanks to their little threat, I'm revoking the lease. Block by block, brick by brick, and there's not a damn thing they can do to stop it. The morning sun cracked across the ridgeline, golden light spilling over my ranch like warm syrup on an old skillet. Cows lowed in the distance, the wooden porch creaked under my boots, and coffee steamed in my calloused hands. It should have been a good day. It was a good day until I opened my mailbox. There it was. Tucked between a seed catalog and an energy bill, an envelope with a gold-foiled HOA logo and the words, "Urgent Property Concern" in bold type. I tore it open with my thumb, expecting maybe some community notice or a fence height complaint. Instead, I got a slap across the face in ink. "Dear property owner," it began, not even bothering to use my name. "Due to aesthetic and developmental concerns regarding your property, we strongly advise that you consider selling to the Homeowners Association at a price reflecting current conditions. Failure to comply may result in legal proceedings to ensure community standards are upheld." I laughed, out loud. Just once. The kind of bark that makes a dog tilt its head. Then I read it again, slowly. They were serious. These HOA folks, the same ones who'd turned the nearby fields into cookie-cutter homes with pastel shutters and chemically green lawns, were trying to buy me out, cheap, like I was some bumpkin, squatting on prime land, holding back their next clubhouse or tennis court expansion. What they didn't know, what none of them could have known, was that their entire development, every street lamp, driveway, and birdbath rested on a 99 municipal lease, a lease signed by my grandfather, a lease I now controlled, and one that had exactly 6 months left on it. I folded the letter carefully, placed it on the kitchen table next to a worn leather folder that hadn't seen the light of day in over a decade. Inside was everything: surveys, contracts, signatures, from dead men, and the city's original stamp. I hadn't looked at it in years, but it was all still valid. The lease had been buried under decades of growth in city bureaucracy, but the legal power was as alive as ever, and these entitled fools had just woken it up. I drove into town that afternoon, the letter still in my jacket pocket. The HOA office sat right at the edge of the subdivision, a fake stone building with big windows and a marble countertop someone probably thought looked upscale. I stepped through the glass doors and made my presence known. "Can I help you?" asked a young man in a navy sweater, his name tag reading Lucas's community liaison. "Yeah," I said, placing the letter on the counter. "You can explain what kind of legal steps you plan to take." Lucas read the letter, then straightened like a mannequin catching wind. "Oh, you're Mr. Reeves. Well, I always sent those to several properties nearby. Nothing personal. It's just, your ranch doesn't align with the aesthetic continuity we're trying to build." I looked him dead in the eye. "Son, that ranch was here before your mom learned how to text, and I've got more aesthetic continuity in my horse barn than your entire HOA." Lucas gave a tight smile. "It's really just a formality. If you're willing to negotiate, the board could offer you a very fair." I held up a finger, stopping him cold. "Don't finish that sentence. Instead, tell your board that their little formality just cost them everything." Lucas blinked. "Excuse me." I leaned in close, just enough for him to smell the dust and saddle oil baked into my jacket. "You're sitting on borrowed land, son, literally, and your lease is almost up." He scoffed. "What lease?" "You'll find out soon," I said, backing toward the door. "Hope your board likes camping, 'cause they're gonna need tents." Back at the ranch, I called my lawyer, Lydia Greer, sharp as a tack and meaner than a dry rattler. She handled my affairs ever since my wife passed, and she knew how to swing legal hammers with quiet precision. "You sure you want to do this?" she asked after I explained the situation. "You know this'll get messy. Public, they tried to bully me off my land. Lydia, I'm just showing them what happens when you pick the wrong target." She chuckled dryly. "All right, cowboy, I'll file the notice of intent. They've got 6 months to vacate unless they renegotiate, and I doubt they'll be smart enough to do that." I thanked her, then walked back outside. The sun was dipping low now, casting long shadows over the fields. I could see the edge of the HOA development from my fence and rows of uniform homes, all pretending to be unique. People sipping wine on identical porches, talking about bylaws like they were gospel. They thought they owned paradise, thought their rules and regulations could erase what came before them, but I was done playing nice, done being quiet while they papered over my history with speed bumps and HOA fines. They wanted a fight. They were about to get a damn war, and the first shot had already been fired. Lydia didn't waste time. By the next morning, a courier truck rumbled down the gravel path to my porch and handed me a thick envelope. official filings, notifications of lease expiration, and a stamped letter addressed to the city and the HOA board. The words "Notice of Intent to Reclaim Property" gleamed in bold at the top. I signed the bottom without blinking. 3 days later, the storm began to roll in. It started with a phone call, unknown number. I answered out of curiosity, only to be greeted by the overly sweet tone of a woman who sounded like she smiled, even when she yelled. "Mr. Reeves, this is Karen Lunsford, president of the Hillside Oaks Homeowners Association. I believe there's been a misunderstanding." I didn't say a word. We received a rather alarming notice regarding a land lease. Surely this is a mistake. The city never mentioned any. Expiration date? No mistake, I said flatly. Well, perhaps you'd be willing to sit down. And I hung up. An hour later, Lydia called. They already tried to file a motion to delay the lease termination. I shut it down. The lease is ironclad. Unless they come to you with a new offer, and I mean a real one, they're done. I spent the afternoon going through the old family documents, spreading them across the dining room table. My grandfather had been smart. He'd leased the land under specific terms. The city could build residential zones, but the property would never change hands. It was a generational agreement, crafted after World War II when farmland was cheap and cities were hungry for expansion. And now, 70 years later, these arrogant HOA suits had no idea they were standing on a ticking clock. By the weekend, the board showed up in person. A row of shiny black SUVs pulled up along the dirt road like they were coming to inspect a crime scene. Karen Lunsford stepped out first, early 60s, tan pantsuit, posture like a crowbar. 2 board members followed behind her, one carrying a leather portfolio and the other wearing sunglasses like he thought he was important. "Mr. Reeves," Karen said, hand outstretched like this was some diplomatic summit. "We'd like to talk." I nodded. Toward the porch. Talk then. They didn't sit, just hovered awkwardly by the railing, noses twitching at the smell of livestock and creosote wood. Karen went first. "We're prepared to offer $1.2 million for your parcel. That's above market value, and we're willing to close fast." I nearly laughed again. "You offering that out of pity or panic?" She blinked, momentarily losing her corporate polish. "We're trying to work with you. Surely there's a number that would make this easier." "There is," I said, "but it ain't money." Sunglasses guy finally spoke up. "You're playing with people's lives, Mr. Reeves. There are families living in that subdivision. They should have picked better neighbors," I said. Karen tried to smooth it over. "This doesn't have to get hostile. If this lease issue is truly valid, it is, then perhaps we can come to an arrangement that protects both your interests and the integrity of our community." I stood. "You threatened me, tried to bully me out. Now you want to talk about integrity." Karen's face hardened. "You're going to destroy a neighborhood out of spite." "No, I'm reclaiming what's mine. You're just the collateral." She muttered something under her breath as she turned and stormed off the porch. The SUVs kicked up dust as they retreated back down the road, smaller than when they arrived. That night, the news hit the local station. Controversy erupts in Hillside Oaks as a decades-old land lease surfaces, threatening to displace an entire subdivision. Residents stunned by the revelation, as legal documents confirm that the land beneath their homes is no longer protected. They showed a clip of Karen outside the HOA office, forced to give a statement in front of a huddle of cameras. She tried to keep her voice calm, but her eyes gave her away. "We're in contact with the city and the original landowner. We are confident this issue will be resolved swiftly and without disruption." The comment section on the broadcast said otherwise. Asterisk, asterisk, so our houses are on borrowed land. Asterisk, 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 Karen, better fix this. We paid for this neighborhood fair and square. Asterisk, 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 this is why you don't mess with old ranchers. Respect the roots. Asterisk, asterisk, emails started flooding in the next day. Some angry, some desperate. A few residents begged me not to go through with it. One woman wrote, asterisk, please don't take our homes. We didn't know. I have 2 kids and nowhere to go. Asterisk, I read that one twice, then closed the laptop. It was the first real pang I felt. Not guilt, exactly, but wait. Still, I didn't back down. This wasn't about tearing lives apart. It was about sending a message. They thought land was something you could strong-arm from the old hands who built it, but they were wrong. They forgot that roots run deep out here, and some of us still remember what it means to protect what's ours. By midweek, a representative from the city finally reached out. A man named Joel Grayson, Deputy Director of Planning. Polite, professional, carefully neutral. "I'd like to meet in person," he said. Strictly off the record. We sat under the oak tree near the barn. He sipped lemonade while I fed my dog scraps of jerky. "Mr. Reeves," he said, glancing at a stack of my lease documents, "you do realize this could set a massive precedent. If you revoke this lease, the city may be liable for mismanagement. We could be looking at lawsuits, insurance nightmares, property value collapses. Not my problem," he sighed. "Is there any resolution you'd accept short of full reclamation?" I thought about that. Not for long. "There might be," I said, "but it won't be easy for your friends in the HOA." And as the wind picked up across the field, rattling the dry grass like old bones, I saw it clearly how this would all play out. one move at a time. They started this war with a letter. Now I was writing the ending. By the time Joel Grayson got back to City Hall, the walls were already cracking. Residents were marching outside the HOA building, holding signs that read, "Where's our land?" And Karen Lee, someone had printed out my original lease agreement and handed out copies like flyers. Word spread faster than wildfire in dry grass, and panic bloomed across Hillside Oaks like mold on wet drywall. Lydia kept the pressure tight. She filed a public notice of termination with the county recorder's office, then followed it with a cease and desist order barring the HOA from authorizing any new construction or home sales. The banks saw it first, then the title companies. By Friday, real estate deals across the subdivision were frozen, open houses canceled, mortgages put on hold. One by one, the dominoes started to fall. Karen called again. I didn't answer. Then came the letter, hand-delivered this time, with embossed stationery and shaky desperation hidden behind lawyer speak. She offered to buy a renewed lease, 20 more years, with a generous payment and a public apology if I agreed not to seize the land. I set it on the porch railing and lit a match. That same day, I drove past Hillside Oaks to get a good look. It felt different now. Before, the place always looked too perfect: plastic flowers and manicured gardens, driveways like polished spods. But now there were cracks. The clubhouse parking lot was half full. A security guard paced outside the HOA office. A few houses already had for sale signs, makeshift ones, handwritten, like people couldn't wait for the agency's dot near the back gate. I spotted a moving truck. They thought I wouldn't come through. They thought I was bluffing. At dusk, I got a visit. This time, it wasn't Karen, it was her husband. Tall guy, ex-military, judging by the posture. He stood at my gate in a polo shirt tucked too tight into his jeans, fists clenched at his sides. "You making a lot of enemies?" he said as I stepped off the porch. I didn't answer. My kids grew up in that house. My wife built this place, from the ground up. You think just because you've got some dusty piece of paper, you can tear it all down? I stared at him. She tried to run me off my own land, threatened me. You want to talk about what's fair? He stepped forward, eyes wild. We didn't know. None of us knew. You want to punish your neighbors for something they didn't do? I didn't move. Just let the silence stretch. Then I said, tell her next time she wants a war, she should check the map. He didn't swing, didn't scream, just looked like a man who finally saw the cliff edge beneath his feet. Then he turned around and walked back down the gravel drive, into the night. By Monday, the HOA board was in shambles. 2 board members resigned. The treasurer went dark. No calls, no emails. I heard rumors that their insurance wouldn't cover them if they'd knowingly misrepresented the lease terms. Turns out, Karen had been warned about the expiring lease a year ago. She buried it, lied to the board, lied to the residents. Now it was boiling over. I stood at the boundary line as a backhoe from the city arrived in marked quiet, early morning. It was there to remove a water meter, per Lydia's request. Technically, it sat on my land. Without a renewed lease, the city had no right to use it, and I wasn't in a generous mood. The backhoe ripped it out like a tooth. A few neighbors gathered on their sidewalks, watching the machine tilt and grunt. One man came up to the fence, maybe 40, sleeves rolled up, worried in his eyes. You really gonna go through with it? He asked. Already am. He nodded slowly. I got 2 kids. Mortgage ain't even halfway paid. Don't suppose there's anything I can do. I looked at him. You got a job? I asked Carpenter. I nodded. If you're looking for work, I'll be building again soon. A few barns? Maybe a new fence line. He blinked, unsure if I was joking. I wasn't. Come by next week, I said. Bring your tools. That night, I watched the sunset from my roof with a cold beer and the kind of peace that only comes after you pull the trigger on something they told you not to touch. I wasn't a cruel man, but I'd been pushed. I'd been tested, and all I'd done was push back with truth. They wanted the land. I reminded them who owned it. The city caved first. Grayson called to confirm they would honor the termination notice and remove all infrastructure from the property line unless a deal could be struck. But I wasn't interested in deals anymore. The HOA tried one last public stunt. Karen held a town hall meeting, stood in front of a projector screen, and spun lies about unfair land practices and surprise legal loopholes. But the residents weren't buying it anymore. Midway through her speech, someone stood up and yelled, "Then why did you hide the lease expiration last year?" Another voice followed. "We trusted you. You're the reason we're in this mess." The crowd turned. News cameras rolled. Karen Lunsford, the queen of Hillside Oaks, looked like she might snap in half. And somewhere deep in my chest, where old hurt and quiet pride lived side by side, I felt the first true flicker of justice. It wasn't over yet, but it had begun. The first domino had fallen, and nothing would stop the rest. They came crawling 2 weeks later. Not the board this time. They were finished. Karen had resigned under pressure after the town hall disaster. Her face plastered across local news for gross negligence and willful concealment. Her husband packed their things in silence the following day. The HOA office was shuttered, the phones went unanswered, and the neighborhood newsletter stopped dead. Mid-issue, half-written, never sent. The new faces were from the city, men in suits, tired ones. They arrived at my gate under the heavy weight of knowing they weren't in control anymore. Joel Grayson came. He wasn't wearing a tie this time. Just a blue dress shirt rolled to the elbows, and a leather folder. He clutched like a surrender flag. "We'd like to discuss transition terms," he said. I didn't make it easy. I made them walk the whole property line with me for miles in the heat, boots full of dust, no shortcuts. I pointed to the places their engineers forgot, the runoff they ignored, the wildlife they displaced. I showed them how their pretty neighborhood had cut off natural drainage and left my south pasture flooded every spring. I told them how their artificial lakes weren't lakes at all, just stolen topsoil turned stagnant by vanity. When we got back to the porch, I finally said, "Talk." Joel was smart. He didn't try to butter me up. "We know the lease is expired. We know you're within your rights to reclaim the land. But the city is asking for a phased transition 90 days. Give residents time to relocate. Let us disconnect water, sewer, power in an orderly way." "And what do I get?" I asked. He opened the folder. "We're prepared to offer a full tax exemption on the ranch for the next 20 years. Access to city infrastructure where needed, and legal support. If anyone tries to sue you, it wasn't charity. It was desperation wrapped in diplomacy. But it was also smart. Fair." I stuck out my hand. 90 days. Not 91. He nodded. "Done." We signed the agreement on the tailgate of my truck while cicadas buzzed through the trees. I watched Joel drive off, dust trailing behind him like smoke from a dying fire. Then I got to work. The first thing I did was refence the boundary. Not cheap chain link like the HOA loved, but raw cedar posts sunk deep and tied with welded wire, strong, permanent, honest. The carpenter I met weeks ago showed up the next day with a belt full of tools and 3 friends in tow. They worked fast, quiet, grateful. They knew exactly what was at stake. By week 3, moving trucks came and went like tidewater. Families packed up under the weight of regret, confusion, and anger. Some waved to me with stiff smiles. Others couldn't even look at me. One woman left a basket of cookies on my gate with a note, *, "Thank you for not tearing it all down overnight." *, I didn't respond. Didn't need to. The power went first, city workers in hard hats shutting off streetlights and transformers. Then came the water crews. Then gas. The neighborhood deflated in slow motion, its life support pulled cord by cord. I watched it all from my porch like a man witnessing the final act of a play he didn't write, but certainly ended on day 8. I rode my horse down what used to be their grand entrance boulevard. No gates now, no signs. Just cracked pavement and silent houses lined like tombstones. I saw a kid's bike left behind in a driveway, a plastic flamingo tipped over and a patch of dead lawn, curtains flapping through a broken window. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like justice. Injustice doesn't cheer. At midnight, Lydia filed the final document. The land was mine again. Clean and uncontested. The subdivision was no longer Hillside Oaks, it was parcel 47 of Reeves Ranch. It had come home that weekend. I took Sam and his crew to the bar in town. We drank until the jukebox broke, then drank more. One of them asked what I planned to do with all that reclaimed land. "Rebuild it," I said. "Not houses, not strip malls. Real things. Barns, stables, maybe even a schoolhouse." Sam raised his glass. 2 roots, and we all drank. In the months that followed, headlines quieted down. The city adjusted, the residents scattered. Some fought back with lawsuits, every one of them tossed out in court. The lease had been public record the whole time. Ignorance wasn't a defense. Karen was last seen in Arizona, trying to start a new HOA in a desert retirement community. I almost felt bad for her neighbors. Almost as for me, I kept the land open. Put up a sign at the new gate, ***, private property, legacy in progress. ***, people stopped by sometimes. Old ranchers, curious city folks, even a few ex-HOA residents looking to apologize, or at least understand. I let some of them walk the edge of the pasture, see what real land looked like before. It was manicured into oblivion, and every time I watched the wind roll over the hills, every time I heard the soft rustle of trees returning to the silence, I knew this wasn't just revenge, this was restoration. They came for me with arrogance. I answered with history, and now, what was once theirs gated, polished, and hollow was finally mine again. Alive. Here is the final call to action script to end the video, encouraging viewers to subscribe, like, or share, cinematic in tone, emotionally resonant, and fitting the revenge power move theme. Call to action scripts sometimes. The loudest power move is silence and a signature on an old piece of paper. They came for his land with threats. He answered with legacy. If you felt that justice hit right where it should, don't let the story end here. Hit that like button, subscribe for more real power plays, and share this story with someone who needs to be reminded. Never underestimate the quiet ones, especially if they still own the dirt under your feet.